The most powerful spiritual practices are not necessarily what the ego thinks, because the ego wants to be what? Pessimistic, arrogant. It wants to make sure everybody notices it. It gets lots of attention. Ego only looks for happiness in the big, grandiose things. Winning outcomes, getting its desires met. And that's the rat race, yeah? You can run that race very hard. You can even win the rat race, and you can get to the cheese first. But you're still a rat. The second we get something, a little bit of happiness is felt. Woo, yeah, I did it. And then right into the fear of losing it. Oh, but what if this person dumps me? Oh, but what if I lose my fortune? What if I lose my fame? I gotta keep it, I gotta withhold it, I gotta protect it. The only way to actually win that rat race is to realize that you're playing a terrible, awful game you don't want to play, and to refuse participation. So let's jump into our conversation for today, carrying our conversation about stillness from last week into this week's conversation. The next kind of foundational piece I want to touch on today for the direct path is the importance of happiness. Now, you might remember a few weeks ago, I've actually said this for a number of weeks now, I believe, but the most powerful and really cutting edge spiritual practices are not necessarily what the ego thinks, right? Ego thinks the most cutting edge practice is like the latest, law of attraction tip or whatever. But those things that yield real spiritual fruits, the quickest and the most noticeably, are the ability to do the simplest things with radical dedication, persistence, and consistency each and every day, over and over and over. Just like we've said, an athlete has to practice the basics, the fundamentals, over and over to get to the place where they can play in the pros one day, right? So if you're choosing the direct path, which is the path of devotion to love, devotion to God, then there's a few of these important foundations to keep in your awareness of this is what it looks like to really be succeeding in this practice, if we want to put it that way. So if devotion is the practice of remembering love as often as possible, then until you live from heart-based consciousness, where the awareness of love is your default state, right? Fourth density consciousness. Until you are at that place, there's a certain attitude that will foster the most progress on this path, and that is simply practicing and cultivating an attitude of happiness throughout your day. Being happy, right? Carrying an energy of joy with you. And so in our Become the Creator series, we spent the last probably half of 2023 going deep into, we've talked a lot about requalifying and training your frequency. That you as the creator have the power at all times to qualify your state of being, to qualify your frequency as you will it to be. But it has to be an ongoing practice, because you have another machination, we might say, the ego, which is always trying to qualify your mental energy to the negative, to separation, and to fear. So if you don't become equally as diligent and committed to requalifying your thoughts and your state of being positively towards love, towards oneness, if you're not as dedicated to that as the ego is going to keep winning. The ego at the end of the day will requalify your energy more to the negative than you'll qualify it to the positive, right? So this has to be a path we consciously choose. Once we understand the metaphysics of how our frequency works, we're not a victim of the circumstances we experience. We're not a victim to life. Life isn't indicating what our frequency should be. The experiences we draw to ourselves aren't forcing us to have some state of being we don't want to have. We're just unconsciously allowing the ego to narrate our life experiences. Yeah? We are allowing the ego to qualify our thoughts negatively without taking those thoughts captive and requalifying them. So, in the way of understanding that happiness is a practice, we can understand that being in a happy, carefree attitude really is the most kind of cutting edge attitude that we can ever adopt, that a devotee can adopt. Because the ego wants to be what? Pessimistic, arrogant. It wants to prove its point. It wants to make sure everybody notices it. It gets lots of attention. And so people go through life believing that if I carry a disposition of I'm the best, look at me, or whatever, that'll be the coolest attitude I could go through life with. Everybody will like me. Everybody will want to be like me if they see how prideful I am and how much I think I'm the best, I'm the greatest, I'm the smartest, I'm the most attractive. And ego really thinks that pride is that most cutting edge attitude. And so when things don't go your way, complaining, griping, bitching, moaning, ego thinks that that's the most cutting edge thing to do when things don't go its way. But what is actually the most cutting edge thing is a happy, carefree attitude. And I've used the analogy of Olaf from Frozen many, many times to picture this for you. If you've seen Frozen, which I'm sure most of you have, the first Frozen, Olaf's character is very interesting because you notice that as the plot unfolds, whatever Olaf goes through, he just has a happy attitude towards it. And because of that, we kind of just love Olaf. We love Olaf's character. We smile when he's on screen. We love everything that comes out of his mouth because he's just in this childlike, happy innocence. Where like even when great perilous danger is coming at him, right, when the snow monster is chasing them down the mountain, like he's not stressed out. He's just like in the moment, carefree, trying to survive. And then he lands on the bottom of the mountain with his head, and his body and his feet displaced from each other. And he just like bounces happily towards his torso and doesn't make a big deal about it. Like that's actually the attitude of enlightenment in a very real way, is to be like a child where, a child's state of innocence. It's very funny, isn't it? This is one of the reasons why humans love having children, because children remind us that we can be happy about the simple things and that we can just be joyful for no reason, right? Same with puppies and animals. We try to soak up their innocence because we've lost our innocence. And so people will have children and kind of like hold this attitude of, loving that their child is always happy and giggly and just playing with toys and just carefree. But on the inside, adults tend to have this kind of belief system about the innocence of children of like, well, we gotta protect its delusion for as long as possible because this child just hasn't figured out yet that life is really hard. And so that's why they're happy. They just haven't figured out reality yet. Once they figure out how reality really is, they'll be like me. They'll be more serious, more stressed out. Happiness will be more fleeting. That's just the way things are. So while this child is in this delusional state of innocence and happiness, let's enjoy it while we can. Yeah, let's appreciate the child's happiness and take lots of videos and pictures we can look back on one day. But as the Ashtavakra Gita says, the master is a child. Or as Jesus says, if you want to enter the kingdom of reality, kingdom of heaven, you must become again as a little child. And of course, pointing to this fact that the innocence of the child is actually not a delusion, it is true wisdom. Course in Miracles says, innocence is wisdom, for it is unaware of evil, unaware of separation, unaware of anything but God. So the child actually comes into the world, in a sense, wiser than the adult. But it's an unconscious wisdom, right? And so enlightenment, what enlightenment really is, could be seen as the second innocence, meaning returning back to our childlike innocence, where we can just be happy and giggle and laugh and play and be in joy just because reality is, because life is. We don't need to go chase outcomes to get happiness. So when we are living from a state of happiness, on the outside to others, they might perceive our happiness as simply us being in a good mood. Oh, something great must have happened to them. Because ego can only project its belief system onto others. Ego's always chasing an outcome, as we know very well here in 40 University. Ego's always chasing the next outcome on the next pedestal. So when other people see us being happy, they'll just think, oh, something great must have happened to them today. Because they cannot see the inward source of where our happiness is coming from. But on the inside, for the devotee, for one who's practicing devotion to God, devotion to love, true happiness is felt or practiced, let's say, as an inward act of worship to God. And that's a maybe unusual definition of happiness you haven't heard before, but happiness in its truest essence is worship to God. Because by carrying an attitude of joy with us always, we're basically silently declaring through our state of being, God's universe is good. God's universe is beautiful and lovely. God's universe is perfect. I'm happy in God's universe, just the way that it is. Your state of being is a living declaration to the Creator, right? Happiness is the state that says, I know who God is, therefore I am happy. Happiness is the state that says, I know what love is, therefore I am happy. So you see how this has to be a prerequisite for the direct path, the practice of devotion, right? If we're practicing devotion with a somber, serious attitude all the time, then we're not really practicing correctly yet, right? A devotee is committed to being happy because happiness is the nature of God. Happiness is the nature of the self. Happiness is the nature of love. God's universe is perfect, undivided, unassailable, without opposite, nothing to cling to, nothing to resist, nothing to fear. Everything one with me, everything perfect, everything intelligent, everything beautiful. God's universe is wonderful beyond imagination. But if we're living from the ego's thought system that says, my happiness depends on outcomes, my happiness does not depend on the way reality is. My happiness does not depend on cosmic laws and universal truths. I ignore those things. They mean nothing to me. My happiness depends on getting those things I want. Well, hey, if you're living from that thought system, you're going to definitely miss the perfection and the beauty and the intelligence and the wonder and the mystery of life all around you. You can't see it, right? You need the spiritual eyes to see it. And so what are those spiritual eyes that give us the vision to realize how indescribably beautiful every moment is? Even the simple moments, the beauty in the blade of grass, the gratitude you feel for waking up in the morning. Like what gives us those eyes to see that? Well, practicing having a happy attitude will give you those eyes, because we have to requalify our state of being, right? If you practice being happy always, literally treat it as a spiritual practice. Part of my devotion to God is to be committed to being happy, because my God is good. My God is wonderful. If that's my spiritual practice, then by practicing being happy, noticing whenever my mind tries to slip into unhappiness, complaining, resisting, etc., and going right back to the happy attitude again, no, I'm not going to take this seriously. Let's just laugh it off. Let's just accept what's happening and trust God. All is well in my Father's kingdom. And you go back again and again and again to the happy attitude as a devotional practice. What are you doing? You're requalifying your state of being. You're training your frequency to be happy. So no wonder we sometimes find the spiritual path to be so heavy and somber and serious and difficult, and we have a furrowed brow half of the day because I gotta grow today. I gotta learn my life lessons. And we're carrying this like inner pressure. Well, it's no wonder we feel that way, because we're not practicing qualifying our state of being to be light, open, free, innocent, childlike, playful. We, as the Course in Miracles says, we forgot to laugh. Course in Miracles says, into eternity, where all is one, there crept a tiny mad idea, in which the Son of God forgot to laugh. So the tiny mad idea was to take reality seriously. It's all separate. It's all difficult. It's all challenging. Separation, fear, lack. And we forgot about laughter. We forgot about joy. We forgot about the play of the universe. And the universe is a play. It's God's grand stage play. So here's the good news. We talk a lot about the Catalyst Journal, Catalyst integration, learning your life lessons. I'm telling you guys, you can learn from your life lessons through laughter, through laughing at your life lessons, just as easily as suffering through them. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be this painful, challenging thing of like finding the lesson, plucking out the thorn from your side and saying, okay, this was the lesson. Like, you can choose to not take life so seriously and to just say, all things are lessons God would have me learn. And when you notice the ego's thought system has held sway in some way, you went back into lack-based thinking, you slipped back into resistance, laugh at it. Laugh at that as soon as you recognize it, because that's one of the most powerful ways to requalify your thoughts, is to stop taking it so seriously. Because if God's already in control, if God's already accomplishing God's will perfectly, and everything God does is good, then what is there to not be happy about? Where is the good reason to be unhappy? Now, this is by no means my way of, implying that we should bypass what we feel or that we should pretend to be happy even when we're not. Happiness has to be authentic. And if we aren't feeling happy, that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with not feeling happy. It just means something needs to be requalified, something needs to be loved, forgiven, and healed. And approaching whatever that is with a happy attitude is the most powerful way to requalify it and heal it. Because love is happy. Love is happiness. And so we talk about being loving towards everything. Yeah. Being in loving relationship to everything, one of the main practices we teach here. Well, to love everything is sometimes a difficult teaching to follow. How can I love everything when painful circumstances arise, when a really scary challenge arises in my life? What does it mean to love that is often the question. And I want to tell you that to love everything is to have a happy attitude towards everything. Just like Olaf, right? Even when the worst thing happens, your attitude should be light, carefree of, oh, this is going to be tough. Let's see how we're going to make it through this one. And at least you're carrying that joyful disposition towards it rather than a heavy, somber disposition, which is just tougher to climb out of. Because if you're able to be happy to any degree, whatever degree to which you can be more light in your approach, more open, more happy in your approach to your life challenges, the easier you're going to make it for yourself to get through that challenge. Because happiness is a higher frequency. And again, happiness is the attitude that says, I know who God is, so I'm just not capable of slipping into worry and fear and doubt the second that a challenge arises, because I know my God is in control. This is happening by the will of God. And so it's for me, it's good, it's here to help me, it's here to teach me, it's here to expand me. And so you can retain a happy attitude even in the midst of a challenge. That doesn't mean it won't feel challenging. Again, I want to reemphasize, it just means you'll have a happy attitude towards the challenge. So if we're practicing correctly, devotion, if we're living from devotion, taking those moments of stillness throughout the day to connect with the awareness of love, to remember love, this is our staple practice here in 40U. If we're doing that correctly, then we should be filled with an overflowing happiness. One who is devoted to God is not detached from ordinary life. It's not a way of ignoring life to live from devotion. Just the opposite. Devotion is not some rigid monastic discipline that we have to carry with a stoic attitude. Sorry, brother, I can't talk right now. I'm devoted to God. Oh, devotion. It's not a monastic type of practice. It is a practice that meets life fully in all of its flavors and varieties, right? A devotee is one who's just as happy in the ordinary, mundane moments as in the thrilling moments. And why? Because their happiness is no longer dependent on external things. Yeah, you're no longer lost and stuck in the rat race of outcome happiness. Your happiness comes from the infinite reservoir of love within you. So if you're connecting to that inner reservoir of love, you will feel happier. Happiness will start to bubble out of you. It'll be reflected to those you meet in your happy disposition. And this is what Jesus was pointing to in John chapter 4, when he told the woman at the well, who was drawing up water from the well. Jesus said, "Whoever drinks of this water will thirst again." Speaking of external things, transient pleasures, the pleasure of the world, yeah? Whoever drinks of that water will continue to thirst. But whoever drinks of the water that I give will never thirst again. But the water that I give him will become in him a fountain of living water, springing up into everlasting life. Sounds pretty happy to me, doesn't it? I want that no reason happiness. I don't know about you. Outcome happiness, out of date. It's an old model. It's a path that has much to teach us, no judgment at all. It's a path that 99% of the world is engaged in, but it is the only purpose it serves, outcome happiness, is to get the soul to the point where it recognizes, oh, my happiness isn't outside of me. At some point, we all have to come to that realization that there is no fulfillment out there of any kind. Even the pursuit of fame won't give it to you. Even the pursuit of wealth won't give you real happiness. You'll just have more expensive ways of chasing outcomes, right? But unless an inner change happens, all the same patterns will be there. All the same traumas, distortions, negative thinking will still be there. So there's no happiness outside of me because nothing outside can change what's on the inside. Happiness is an inner state of being that is found within the self. And so we really have these two distinctions here that we're drawing at. Mountaintop happiness versus valley happiness. Just to use a simple analogy, right? We talk a lot about the ego's brand of happiness in 40U as being outcome happiness. The second belief of ego, right? My happiness is outside. I have to go get it through pleasurable outcomes. And that's the rat race, yeah? That's the rat race that everyone's engaged in, that you can run that race very hard. You can chase the cheese along with everybody else, and you can even win the rat race, and you can get to the cheese first. But you're still a rat, so nobody really wins, right? And the only way to actually win that rat race is to realize that you're playing a terrible, awful game you don't want to play, and to refuse participation. Refusing to run the rat race is paradoxically the way to win it. And that's when happiness starts to be found within the self. So ego only looks for happiness in the big, grandiose things, winning outcomes, getting its desires met. And that's what the mountaintop represents, right? Ego's always trekking up the mountain, climbing up the mountain, trying to get to that mountaintop where it can finally say, I've done it. I've achieved the pleasurable outcome that I've so long desired. Now I am truly happy. And then as the ego stands up there at the top of the mountain, ego notices it's very windy. There might be other climbers coming up right behind it, trying to pull the ego off so they can have the mountaintop to themselves. It's a long way down from here if they fall. So the ego barely even gets a chance to appreciate the view before it starts to fear losing the view, right? The second we get something, a little bit of happiness is felt. Woo, yeah, I did it. And then right into the fear of losing it. Oh, but what if this person dumps me? Oh, but what if I lose my fortune? What if I lose my fame? Whatever it is. And then we go into this self-preservation mode of, I gotta keep it, I gotta withhold it, I gotta protect it. And now you're living from scarcity again. So mountaintop happiness is an absolute illusion, because even when you get it, you don't really get it, right? But the devotee of God is happy not because they've scaled some great mountain and arrived at some great view, but because they just know the way things really are. They're happy just knowing how reality actually is. The devotee is happy because they know my beloved is everywhere, in all things. And so the devotee is always happy because of this knowledge. The awakened mind is happy just by understanding the nature of reality. It's what we call no reason happiness. You might ask an ego why they're happy, and they'll say, oh, because I just started dating a new person, or because I just got a promotion, or I'm going on vacation this weekend, or whatever, right? There's a reason why an ego is happy. But if you ask a devotee why they're happy, they'll say, because God is good, brother. Because reality is perfect. That's why I'm happy. Nothing has happened that has made me happy. I'm happy because of what is. So devotion travels through the valley and is happy in the valley. And because the devotee is happy in the valley, it can travel anywhere. It can go anywhere. While the ego at the mountaintop can't go anywhere, or it's going to fall off the mountain. You see that? Being at the mountain peak, when you've achieved your outcome, means you've got nowhere left to go. You've just got to preserve that outcome. And guess what? Bad news for the ego is all outcomes wear off. All fleeting pleasure is not lasting, totally transient, inherently unfulfilling. It's a black hole that sucks you into it. You can never get enough. You always got to get the next one and the next one. And as soon as the ego's flicked off the mountaintop, tumbling back down into the valley, the ego despises the valley, right? The ego hates the ordinary, mundane moments of life. The ego's always comparing every present moment to the mountaintop moments. This moment's not as good as back in the glory days when I was a famous athlete, or when I was attractive, or when I had more money, or on that vacation, or with that person. Ego's always comparing the present moment to mountaintop experiences and finding the present moment lacking. Can you see that? From the mountaintop, the ego can't go anywhere but down. So once it makes it to the top, the next immediate fear is, what if I fall off? So because of this, true happiness is deep, not high. I want you to see that. True happiness, the happiness of God, the happiness of love, is deep happiness. Omnipresent, always prevalent in every moment. It's not a high mountaintop experience. The difference being, as the devotee is traveling through life, through the valley, God may very well and very often even lead the devotee to a mountaintop experience, and the devotee can be happy on the mountaintop. But the difference is, they're no more happy on the mountaintop than in the valley. Because the devotee is happy in the valley, they can truly appreciate the mountaintop. And then, because they actually can appreciate the mountaintop, the wedding, the birth of your first child, getting that big promotion, signing that book deal, writing that hit record, like whatever a mountaintop experience to you looks like, well, if you appreciate your everyday life, if you're happy in the simple things, if you're happy just upon awakening, then you'll be happy there too. And you won't get attached and you won't cling. Yeah? And so then you don't have to get flicked off the mountain by karma. Karma doesn't need to come and boot you off the mountain. You can walk down the mountain, right? So true happiness is deep, not high. It's a state of total harmony with life. A state that's free of imposition on life, free of craving after life or resistance towards life. And because it's free of craving or resistance, it is a state of power and creation. A happy attitude is a powerful position to create from. Because what do we say? Visualize the reality you wish to manifest, feel as if it's happening now, and feel that happiness that you would feel if that reality were manifested right now. If you want to write a hit record, feel the experience of having that hit record now. Well, that's just happiness. So if you're happy, you're always exuding that vibration of, I trust the universe. I know that everything that is good belongs to me. I know that every good and perfect thing comes from my Father, who is dwelling within my heart. Happiness comes from what is, not from what was or what will be. So you're not bound in time anymore, as that Course in Miracles quote said. True happiness shines equally in the valley and the mountaintop. And so the devotee of God lives within themselves, not out here in the external plane. A devotee lives within themselves, enjoying their inner experience of union with God, union with love. And the outer world, the external experiences we have, that's just like a passing show. We're not clinging to it or resisting it anymore. It's very, very secondary to the inner experience now. And because we have found what every soul must find, which is the inward path of union with God, and we start to live from within ourselves more and more, then now that inner state of being is reflected outwards. And now, because we're happy with the way things are inside, this is the key, because we're happy with the way things are inside, we can finally be happy with the way things are outside, with the circumstances that arise. So devotion to happiness as a practice is devotion to love. They are one and the same practice, right? Because love is happy. Happiness is the attitude of love.